are at a loss to explain what is causing this weather and why it has taken them by surprise.
That sudden drop in temperature as half an hour ago, Mexican officials closed the border in light of so many U.S. refugees.
We prepare to go live to Los Angeles.
Are you getting this on camera? What you see is happening now.
Look over there behind me! That's a tornado! Yes, a twister!
This is just massive.
This was the fiery scene on the highly trafficked Interstate 15 Friday afternoon. A brush fire on either side of the freeway forced traffic to stop, and soon more than a dozen vehicles became engulfed in flames.
This exercise, because it's occurring not just on military bases, but also on public land and also on private property, is causing much more suspicion.
Beginning today, more than 1,000 American troops will descend across 7 Southwest states for a 2-month military training exercise named Jade Helm 15. It's expected to be one of the largest military training exercises ever performed on domestic soil. But Jade Helm 15 is being met with suspicion by a lot of folks who live in the areas where it's supposed to happen. And a lot of people are putting out some theories. I hate to call them conspiracy theories, although some are characterizing it that way. And part of the fear here is because of this military handout. The map shows 7 states involved and labels certain states like Texas hostile territory. National security correspondent David Martin joins us from the Pentagon. I mean, if they wanted people to greet the troops with open arms, it does seem like calling it hostile territory, even for a training exercise, well, it might ruffle some feathers.
Well, that's probably not a smart choice of words. I don't think they meant that document to become public. But the Army is not helping its cause here by being so vague about what this exercise is all about. It's left this vacuum of information into which all these conspiracy theories have crept. All the Army really says is they are developing new warfare tactics in a landscape that resembles the Middle East. And you know, if you're suspicious of government intentions to begin with, there's not a lot in that statement that is going to reassure you.
Even this, David, sorry, but even the graphic that we're showing right here where the legend says hostile, permissive, uncertain, and uncertain, leaning friendly or leaning hostile, some theorists have come up with the idea that they have the red list. These are people who would take on the government if they thought that the government was there to suppress free speech and to suppress democracy, and that there are kill plans in place for everyone who's leaning hostile.
Well, you know, those are pretty far-fetched. For the first place, 1,200 soldiers are going to be involved in this. 1,200 soldiers over 7 states is not a very big force and is not going to crush anybody. But more to the point, I think I've been on smaller versions of exercises like this, these special operations exercises, and the scenario is almost always the same. You have American soldiers infiltrating quote-unquote hostile territory where they link up with friendly resistance fighters and form a guerrilla army to try to overthrow the hostile government. And in fact, the one public event, the one event that's going to be open to press coverage in this exercise, involves a night jump by paratroopers onto a military base outside San Antonio, where they are going to link up with the special forces who have already infiltrated on the ground. And that is the classic example of what the military calls forcible entry, seizing an enemy-held airfield and turning it into your own base of operations. And just by coincidence, also in August, the Army is holding a much larger forcible entry exercise out in California. But that's occurring on a military base and has not generated any conspiracy theories, at least so far. This exercise, because it's occurring not just on military bases, but also on public land and also on private property, is causing much more suspicion.
All right, David, thank you so much for trying to clear up some of the confusion about this. It probably, as you said, would be better if the Army just came out and said exactly what they were trying to do here. David Martin at the Pentagon, thanks.
Have a look at this big wedge tornado near Monmouth, Illinois. This was Thursday evening, and this thing was not only big, it was also what we call a multiple vortex tornado. And actually, a lot of big tornadoes are multiple vortex tornadoes. You've got a big parent circulation, and within that large circulation, you've got a bunch of smaller ones. They're called subvortices or suction vortices, and these things tend to do the most damage. I mean, gosh, look, what do you have here? About 4 or 5 of them, something like that? I mean, this was a big tornado that actually did a lot of damage. Now, very often, you can't see the multiple vortices in a multiple vortex tornado because the view will be shrouded by either debris, rain, a condensation funnel. But in this case, you can see it. I guarantee you, in a lot of these big tornadoes, you've got that going on in the middle.
So cool.
People in one Philadelphia neighborhood are frustrated with 2 holes that opened up right in the middle of their neighborhood. They say the holes are dangerous and growing bigger by the day. Eyewitness News reporter Simon Chowdhury has the story now from Kensington.
I see a sinkhole, not a pothole, a sinkhole.
Folks in Kensington have noticed a couple of holes in their streets.
On a scale of 1 to 10, a 12.
Marge Gilmore has lived in Kensington her whole life and has never seen the streets in such bad shape. She tells us she hurt herself 2 weeks ago after falling in this sinkhole on the 3400 block of Kime Street.
It was dark and I didn't even see it. I just fell in it. I hear myself scream, and the next thing I know, I'm in the hole.
Gilmore says she's getting physical therapy from the fall and plans on suing the city.
That's some peace of mind, and that's going to get fixed.
Neighbors say the hole has been there for about a month and a half. They called the city,
letting them know that it's getting worse and worse and worse, and no response.
Joseph Oldham blew out a tire and scraped his car driving over it.
The hole started off probably about that big, and now I can fit in it.
He really can. Oldham recently took this picture. He was standing on a crate and a box, leading him to believe the hole is about 8 feet deep. Oldham says he sent the picture to the city.
I figured that would get my point across to the streets department.
Just 2 blocks away on Crystal Street, another sinkhole has folks on edge.
It's very, very dangerous.
Neighbors say the hole has been getting deeper and deeper over the past few weeks. They've also noticed cracks starting to pop up around it, making them believe that the street will soon cave in.
I'm losing faith in Philadelphia departments.
City officials tell us the streets department will work with the water department to determine the cause of both holes and will barricade them off in the meantime. In Kensington, Simon Chowdhury, CBS 3 Eyewitness News.
earthquake with a magnitude of 7.0 has hit off the Solomon Islands, but seismologists say it's unlikely to cause dangerous tsunami. The USGS said the quake struck about 80 kilometers off Lata Island around 2:30 p.m. Saturday local time. The focus was 10 kilometers deep.
Nenka claiming the lives of 2 people in Japan. Japanese media reporting 2 elderly men died while trying to prepare their homes and land before the storm made landfall yesterday.
Officials are also checking out reports that a person was washed away by floodwaters. Nenka is expected to weaken over the next several days, which could drop as much as 35 inches of rain in Japan.
Just bringing some live pictures coming into us from Athens. This is of a huge fire on the east side of the Greek capital. We're being told that 35 fighters are tackling the blaze. Apparently it spread very quickly because of high winds. This is the Imitos mountain and it's very near. You can't quite see the scale of it there, but you can almost see it encroaching onto very densely populated areas. Lots of pictures on Twitter of this as well, people taking pictures from their balconies and saying how close it is to their homes. A lot of concern there. They're saying it's on the Hymettus Ridge over Athens, very near a densely populated area. I'll keep an eye on those pictures and bring you more as we get it.
The raw buzz of chainsaws cut the air as the cleanup began in Cameron. Sam and Diane Charrington watched as crews took out tree after tree in their front lawn. Diane remembers how scary the tornado was.
I could feel debris hitting my head and my ears just began to pop and so I thought, I need to get away from the door. We still have our home and we were able to stay here last night and, you know, like the people across the street, they lost their roof for their house and so we're very fortunate.
Not so fortunate were their neighbors, the Eilers. Their garage balances precariously, unstable and dangerous.
Well, we lost the south side of the garage here, and it's shifting to the south and to the east. It's going to go eventually. Our cars are inside, and we've got a lot of stuff stored up above. We've lost some trees. Our house is good, though, and we're doing fine, so that's the main thing.
While destruction of homes and buildings was widespread, there were only a few minor injuries, and no people died. Still, things are far from normal here. The surrounding landscape that longtime residents like Sam and Pat Fox had invested years in will take another generation to rebuild.
You've lost so many years of enjoyment, and it'll never happen again.
In Cameron, Illinois, for the Weather Channel, I'm Scott Newell.
Oh my god! That was literally in our backyard. Oh my god!
Our top story this morning, frightening moments on a Southern California highway. More than a dozen vehicles caught fire and were destroyed when a wildfire jumped the main road to Las Vegas. Many more drivers were trapped by the flames, which have already burned 3,500 acres northeast of Los Angeles.
Danielle Nottingham is in our Los Angeles bureau with more. Danielle, good morning.
Good morning. Not only were multiple vehicles burned, the fire has also destroyed a number of nearby structures. While no injuries have been reported, motorists were forced out of their cars to save their lives.
This was the fiery scene on the highly trafficked Interstate 15 Friday afternoon. A brush fire on either side of the freeway forced traffic to stop. And soon, more than a dozen vehicles became engulfed in flames.
You can still see the cars that caught fire. They're burning there in the middle of your screen. They've actually made some drops onto those cars as well.
It was terrifying. You can feel the heat on our face.
17-year-old Talia Sclafani took this photo as she ran to safety. The water drops continued, but flames jumped from vehicle to vehicle. Passenger cars, a semi-truck, a car hauler, and even a boat were completely destroyed.
And before we knew it, the winds picked up and it came rushing, and they evacuated everybody. And we all had to run up the hill as far as we could go.
Motorists were able to return to their cars once the flames on the freeway were safely extinguished.
Couldn't get out. It started over at that end, I believe, and then it slowly started to move forward, and then it jumped the lane.
But the fire continued to burn into nearby brush into the evening hours, burning structures and forcing evacuations.
Right now, the fire is 5% contained. Drone activity is becoming a recurring problem for firefighting aircraft. According to the U.S. Forest Service, several planes were grounded or delayed because of drones flying in the area. Benita?
Danielle Nottingham in Los Angeles this morning.
Top of breaking news right now. A lightning strike at Del Mar Park in Aurora sends 4 people to the hospital. Fortunately, all of those people were not directly hit and only had minor injuries. A witness telling us the lightning may have struck the pool and injured lifeguards at the park.
We seen the lightning start coming out, and then the lightning hit this tree over here. And it was just a big boom, and everybody just scattered. Then we seen them carrying a couple lifeguards out of the pool.
Now, we're still waiting to confirm details with Aurora Fire. This all coming just one day after 4 people were hurt in a lightning strike in Chaffee County.
Kristen, as you know, the drought in the Northwest this summer is being called historic.
Top state and federal drought experts in Washington today warned it could even be a year or more until these dry conditions improve. Lisa Balick has more on this impact. Lisa?
Yeah, listen to this. I found out that Washington state has received less rain than even landlocked Phoenix, Arizona in the past couple of months. Now, our dry spell spells big trouble around here.
The Evergreen State is, well, not so much right now. Washington state water experts told me today 99% of the state is in a drought, and the dry spell is causing a tidal wave for the economy. The heat is hurting berry crops. Most of the nation's raspberries are grown here. Livestock feed is withering, and the heat is stressing cattle. Washington is second to California in wine production in the country, but natural resource leaders tell me fruit in Washington vineyards and orchards is getting sunburn. Like Oregon, Washington is shutting down fishing on many rivers or limiting hours to try and save native species. Really, no choice when about 85% of the rivers are running lower than normal, about half at record lows. The Olympic National Park in northwest Washington is normally the wettest spot in the lower 48. Now, it's so dry there, 1,600 acres in its wilderness are on fire. How bad is it going to get? Washington state climatologists told me odds are we're going to stay drier and warmer than normal, even through next winter.
Now, as for water rationing, Washington state says that it's up to individual water districts, unlike California, which has a lot more state control. Dan, Jennifer?
Okay, Lisa, thank you for that update.
with raids and seizures of guns, money, and computers. Saudi Arabia's Interior Ministry says it's dealt a massive blow to ISIL. Security forces arrested 431 people they say are tied to the terrorist group.
Within the past few weeks, we have nearly put an end to ISIL in Saudi Arabia, a group that threatens our society. This organization is being directed and supervised from outside the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. 431 individuals have been arrested.
Officials say the suspects are from across the Middle East and Africa. They are believed to be involved in deadly bombings of mosques in the cities Dammam, Dalwa, and Qatif. Security forces believe they have foiled 6 other attacks being planned against Saudi targets.
ISIL is trying to create a rift in the kingdom. They want to create chaos here through these terror cells, which included citizens from Saudi Arabia and other countries.
With the arrests, Saudi Arabia is also hoping they have squashed the ability of ISIL to recruit more fighters. Natasha Ghanem, Al Jazeera.
And I think it's worth pausing on the number of 120 lives lost in one explosion, quite staggering. 140 wounded, 13 of them children, 14 of them women. Now, this appeared to have occurred when a man managed to use ice to enshroud his explosives to bring his truck into the middle of a crowded outdoor market in the town of Khan Bani Saad in Diyala province. That's an area which ISIS are supposed to have been pushed out of, but clearly are still able to penetrate. Now, of course, he appears to have been offering prices for the ice that were significantly lower than the market. And in this extraordinary heat in an area like Diyala, people, of course, would have rushed ahead of the Eid celebration that we're in right now, that began yesterday in earnest, to buy that ice. And it was when that crowd of hundreds gathered around that truck that he detonated the device, killing all those people. Most of them Shiites. Of course, as you know, ISIS predominantly a Sunni extremist group targeting Shiites here, and this grossly sectarian war that's been raging now in Iraq for quite some time, but particularly hitting a peak with ISIS activity right now. And I think many are terrified this might be showing a switch towards the people used to call them spectacular bombings that Al-Qaeda in Iraq are responsible almost 10 years ago now, trying to make sure the death tolls are what staggers rather than those gruesome videos we've been seeing of executions from ISIS in the past months or so, Paula.
The Sun released a 17-second film showing Queen Elizabeth at about 6 years old when she was just a princess. Her sister, Princess Margaret, at her side, the Queen Mother, and their uncle, the Prince of Wales. Now, the film appears to show the royals performing the Nazi salute. The palace says, quote, "It is disappointing that film shot 8 decades ago and apparently from Her Royal Majesty's personal archive has been obtained and exploited in this manner." Now, the Queen's uncle Edward was accused of being a Nazi sympathizer during the rise of Hitler in the 1930s. He abdicated the throne in 1936 to marry American socialite Wallis Simpson. Now, earlier I spoke with Royals biographer Hugo Vickers about how he felt about the Sun's decision to release the film.
First of all, they probably shouldn't have had it. Secondly, it will have been obtained by some strange method, and they won't tell us how they got it. And thirdly, of course, there should be a copyright issue. It's the Queen's copyright. It's her film, and it shouldn't have appeared. It's totally irrelevant. I quite agree with you.
In terms of context here, though, I mean, given what was happening in that period in the 1930s, does it tarnish in any way what everyone says is an impeccable record from the royals during World War II, starting with the Queen Mother herself?
Well, I think, you have to just look at the facts, don't you? The Queen Mother was one of our really most important war leaders, I would almost venture to say. I mean, she stayed in London with the King. That proved that things couldn't be too bad. They visited the bombed areas. They kept their children in England. They didn't send them off to Canada. She broadcast to the women of Britain. She did an amazing job, and she always remained resolutely a civilian. She never wore uniform, and so the images that you got of the Queen Mother at that time were of sometimes a woman in a little pony carriage with the two princesses cycling behind her, a hugely different, a contrast to what was coming out of Nazi Germany with people marching around in sinister black uniforms. She did a fantastic job, so the record stands.
In terms of the tabloid, as you said, this was clickbait, and I'm sure that it actually worked. Many people have gone online to look at this video. They, of course, argue that it's in the journalistic interest. Do you think, though, that it perhaps begins a new period with the royals in Britain in general with the media? They've been fairly hands-off since the death of Diana. Do you think that this marks a different period?
No, I don't. I think this is a one-off thing that somebody got hold of this little bit of footage and saw the possibilities which they could exploit, as has been said, and they used it. I think it'll pass by pretty quickly, frankly, and I agree with you. I think that the response has generally been sympathetic to the royal family, and I think this. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. I think the Sun sounds pretty hypocritical because they try to pretend that it's in the national interest that we should see these things, and they particularly, of course, relate this to the various accusations that have been levelled against the Duke of Windsor pretty much unfairly over a number of years.
Meteorologists are at a loss to explain what is causing this weather and why it has taken them by surprise.
That sudden drop in temperature as half an hour ago. Mexican officials closed the border in the light of so many U.S. refugees.
We prepare to go live to Los Angeles.
Are you getting this on camera? What you see is happening now.
Look over there behind me! That's a tornado! Yes, a twister!
This is just massive.
This exercise, because it's occurring not just on military bases, but also on public land and also on private property, is causing much more suspicion.
Beginning today, more than 1,000 American troops will descend across 7 Southwest states for a 2-month military training exercise named Jade Helm 15. It's expected.
This was the fiery scene on the highly trafficked Interstate 15 Friday afternoon. A brush fire on either side of the freeway forced traffic to stop, and soon more than a dozen vehicles became engulfed in flames.
What this exercise is all about, it's left this vacuum of information into which all these conspiracy theories have crept. All the Army really says is they are developing new warfare tactics in a landscape that resembles the Middle East. And if you're suspicious of government intentions to begin with, there's not a lot in that statement that is going to reassure you.
Even this, David, sorry, but even the graphic that we're showing right here where the legend says hostile, permissive, uncertain, and uncertain, leaning friendly or leaning hostile, some theorists have come up with the idea that they have the red list. These are people who would take on the government if they thought that the government was there to suppress free speech and to suppress democracy, and that there are kill plans in place for everyone. To be one of the largest military training exercises ever performed on domestic soil. But Jade Helm 15 is being met with suspicion by a lot of folks who live in the areas where it's supposed to happen. And a lot of people are putting out some theories. I hate to call them conspiracy theories, although some are characterizing it that way. And part of the fear here is because of this military handout. The map shows 7 states involved and labels certain states like Texas hostile territory. National security correspondent David Martin joins us from the Pentagon. I mean, if they wanted people to greet the troops with open arms, it does seem like calling it hostile territory, even for a training exercise, well, it might ruffle some feathers.
Well, that's probably not a smart choice of words. I don't think they meant that document to become public. But the Army is not helping its cause here by being so vague about